All right, Shalom. Before I begin, I'd like to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Ruach Kodash. I'd like to say no honors to my teachers, the men whom I've learned this truth from, the apostles, bishops, and elders of Great Millstone. And I'd also like to say shalom and salutations to the elect that's out there preaching this word in truth and sincerity. I'm the brother Shaquat from the branch of Great Millstone, Montreal. Back with another lesson, and this lesson is going to be an in-transit lesson, an impromptu style, but I'll be basically going into something that we briefly touched at camp, and that's pretty much character perception, or just perception, how you're perceived as an individual. Because when you look at Esau Edom, he painted Jake to be perceived a particular way. He painted the Israelites to be perceived a particular way, and that way that he painted us to look or to be perceived is a negative light, in a negative way, man. And that was done purposely, because how are we painted in a negative light? When you take a look at these movies, these TV shows, these music videos, and so on and so forth, modern day, right? I'm talking about, and even before that, I could say to the early 2000s or 90s, late 90s, because that's when rap and things were really pushed heavily, man, and rap really, the music industry gave Jake the worst reputation as a nation, man, because what's promoted in the music industry, drugs, sex, murder, and so on and so forth, just degeneracy, and that, because when you think of a rapper, you think about a so-called black man, really a so-called African American, the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, Levi, one of them, that's the first thing that comes into your mind, or anybody's mind, when the word rap is thrown around. Hip-hop. Why? Because that's who Esau Edom made to fit in that box, Jake, and all the negative things that come with it. But that's for a reason, man. He does that for a reason, and that's to keep us at bay, at the bottom. That's to keep us downtrodden, man. Right? Psalm 64 speaks about the secret counsels of the wicked. So they invest a lot of money into basically portraying us a particular way. Because someone's image and how they're perceived is very important, man. Because even something as simple as the colors, not colors, but like the names black and white, him calling us black and calling himself white, that has a major impact on a person, man. Because subconsciously, when you look at a black person, or when you call somebody black, subconsciously what comes to your mind? Negativity, because that's what's tied with black. Negativity, void of light, right? Depression, darkness, rainy, anything negative. The black cat, bad luck, and so on and so forth, right? And also you wear all black if you don't want to be seen, and you want to be in disguise, all black, right? But then the flip side of that, white, what does it symbolize, and how is it perceived in a person's subconscious? White is what? Pure, innocent, clean, but those things are all the opposite of what the so-called white man is. But he pushed those two colors, black and white, because what? Because he had an agenda. It was for a reason, so that he could be perceived as the superior being. And us, the Israelites, the so-called blacks specifically, but also the Hispanics and Native Americans, could be seen in a negative light, man. Could be, perceived as nothing worth, man. But in reality, he's actually the one that's worthless. He's the basis of the nations, man. Because you got 18 nations on the earth, and the basis of the basis is the Edomites, the so-called white race, so-called, right? So-called white race. And why do we say so-called white? Because he's not actually white. He's actually red, because his skin is translucent. It shows forth through his skin, right? But they're the bases of the bases, right? Because these other nations are base, but the bases of them, the lowest of them, are the Edomites, right? That also reminds me of the book of Ecclesiastes. I think it's 10, yeah. But it says, there's an evil which I have seen under the sun, as an error which proceeded from the ruler. Folly is set in great dignity, but the rich sit in low place, right? So that folly is foolishness that's exalted, that's being honored, because that's what that word dignity means. Folly is set in great dignity, foolishness. And the rich sit in a low place. And who's the rich? The rich are the Israelites. Our Revelation, when it speaks about thou art rich, I know that poverty and tribulation, but thou art rich, because we're the richest nation in the spirit, man. We're rich in spirit. We have the most spirit, for lack of better words. We're the most blessed spiritually, and that's because we are the Heavenly Father's children, right? But we're sitting in a low place, right? But the rich sit in a low place. I have seen servants upon horses and princes walking as servants upon the earth, right? And those servants that are on horses are symbolic to these Edomites, because they're a nation that was made to be servants, along with these other nations, right? Along with this other nations on the earth, right? The Ishmaelites, the Hamites, Cushites, the Ammonites, and so on and so forth. The Moabites, all these other nations were made to serve the Israelites, right? So they're servants, beginning with the so-called white man, the Edomites. But guess what? They're sitting upon horses, meaning they're sitting on power, right? Hence you get the term horsepower. But they're sitting on the power seat. A servant is sitting on the power seat. And these other nations, they all ruled. They all had their time to rule, right? Which is known as the time of the Gentiles as well. And we've pretty much been under captivity almost, pretty much under every nation, And that's our servants upon horses, right? But it says, and princes walking as servants upon the earth, man. But so we have the princes, which are us, at the bottom, like we're servants, which we're not supposed to be. But then if you understand the reason for why that is, it makes sense, right? Because we disobeyed the Heavenly Father first and foremost. We went against his laws, statutes, and commandments. We broke a covenant that we made with them. Therefore, that's a part of our punishment, to be at the bottom. But then not only that, Esau, Edom, he overdid being the sword for the Heavenly Father, right? He overdid basically punishing us, because us being under him was a punishment. But the thing is, when you read Ezekiel 35, he overdid his job, because there's a lot of things that he did that were not acceptable, So yeah, that's us at the bottom, and we're supposed to be at the top. But the time is coming where the Lord is gonna make that switcheroo. You know, He's gonna make things. He's gonna put things in order. That's what Yahweh Shai is coming to do. He's gonna put things in order. You know. So hey man, with that I hope this lesson was edifying. I want to say call Halayim La Yahweh Ba'Hashem Yahweh Shai Ba'Hashem R'Chakodash. Once again, the belongings to my teachers, the apostles, the bishops, and elders of Great Millstone, and shalom and salutations to the elect.